Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I'm back with episode 3 of the Women Mean Business interview series. And today I'm joined by the lovely Bee Janaye, who's an interior designer who actually started her own business during lockdown last year. So welcome, Bee Janaye.
Thank you. Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
So yeah, it's really good to have you on. So as I've said, well, not to you, but obviously to the viewers, yeah, this series is all about speaking to different women in different industries, parts of business, not just property, although that's sort of like my main space. But it's really to sort of encourage, the public and inspire them to go after the things that they want to do, their dreams, their passions, their visions, and make them a reality.
Yeah.
So it's great to have you on as a guest, speaking about interior design because that's an area that I feel a lot of people do have interest, but they
Mm.
might struggle with like how to break through and the steps that they need to take. So it'd be really great to hear your story today. So yeah, I guess if you could start with telling us a bit about you and your journey so far, like about your career.
Yeah, of course. I think you made a good point there about the fact that interior design is quite a difficult industry to break
Mm,
into. And I think part of that is it's not necessarily a traditional career. It's not something that's taught as a subject.
right.
And I feel that is something I kind of walked into in a bit of a different way. So my experience was relatively artistic, but I was quite academic. So I was at university and I was studying English literature. I'd done well in my A levels and I'd done well throughout school. So it kind of felt like the next natural step to move on to university and study one of those traditional subjects. But I didn't really feel like I knew what I wanted to do
Mm,
following that. So I decided to stop the degree. And I feel like at that point, that was probably quite a turning point for me because I had to sit down and figure out exactly what I wanted to do and just reflect upon my experience in various industries and kind of draw it all together and find something that I felt like I could work towards in terms of my
yeah.
career and where I wanted my life to go. Um, and at the time, I had quite a lot of experience in the fashion field. So I did some interning with fashion designers and stylists and with a fashion editorial post as well. So I had a few kind of posts of experience within that industry, but I feel like my passion for interior design probably came from set design because while I was assisting the fashion
Mm,
stylist, I started to become more engrossed in actually dealing with the sets and how things were laid out and the impact that that could have on the wider shoot. And I think that's probably where the seed was initially planted. But yeah, other than that, I just decided that that was the industry I wanted to go into, and I looked
mm,
at what the requirements were to break into that industry, to be successful within that industry. And I found that it needed a degree, and I just dropped out of university. So it was quite a sticking point for me. And I realized I was going to have to work really hard over the following few years
yeah.
to get up to speed with the industry to a point whereby I would be in a position to apply for jobs within industry because it's such a competitive industry as is any creative
Mm,
field. So
yeah.
I decided to take my studies a bit further within that field, and I took a degree in the evenings and at the weekends.
Okay.
It was an online degree with KLC School of Design, and that really gave me the foundations that I needed to understand what it was to be a working interior designer and what it was to run a working project. Um, so that was kind of the beginning for me, and I was lucky enough to have various job roles within the industry as I was studying. And I think the fact that I had my foot in the door being in the middle of that degree was helpful for me to get those jobs and get those roles. And so I gained my experience at the same time as I gained my qualification.
Okay, good. So, you're able to get your qualifications, but in terms of your client base, then how did you find building that? Was it because you worked with certain clients before in previous roles, and then you're able to get some of those over into your private business, or how did you manage that?
No, so I had to start from scratch with my clients. I think it would be fair to say that my industry is largely word of mouth. So a lot of the
Mm,
time, your client base will come from
yeah,
recommendations, which puts you in a bit of a difficult position as a starter because ultimately it means that you're going to have to get yourself out there to build your portfolio. I think it's fair to say that it's nearly impossible to be successful in the industry without a solid portfolio and an
Mm,
initial solid client base, because that is where your
mm,
work will come from.
yeah,
So I guess I would just say that you have to be prepared to take potentially lower paying jobs or um, projects at the beginning of your career within the industry, just to build that creative portfolio up, because it really is, it's all aesthetic and what people can see, what as in
yeah,
terms of what you
exactly.
can do. So it was, yeah, it was a bit of a grind at the beginning, just working on various projects, smaller projects, and also projects that weren't necessarily paying me as much. But I did a lot of that while I had a career, um, and I had a full time job in another company. So that kind of helped
That
me
makes
to
sense.
balance my time,
Yeah,
and balance expenses, which is quite an important thing. If you're living alone and you're trying to start a business, especially if you're trying to break into a new industry, you need to have that financial buffer as well.
yeah. That's great that you mentioned that actually, because I was going to ask you. So obviously, transitioning into having your own business, especially during lockdown when times are like hard for a lot of people, like how did you manage like getting your startup costs and all the capital together to start this business?
Yeah. It was quite difficult because I had just bought a property. So I just bought an apartment and I was in the middle of a renovation when lockdown happened. And then I got made redundant from my job in the industry. So it was a lot all at once, to be
Uh,
honest. And I think, do you know what? I think it depends on what kind of person you are, but it was just more of a fight or fly type of situation. I had to make that work, and I decided to see it as more of an opportunity to take that jump, because I think no matter how prepared you are to start your business and how prepared you are to leave your job and move into your business full time, it's always a bit of a jump. It's a bit of a free fall at the beginning because you don't
mm,
know what the response is going to be.
yeah,
With interior design, I don't think that there has to be a huge startup cost. It depends what platforms you're using. I think that I would say the largest startup costs within the industry, within the business, is probably to do with the softwares that you're using. So the softwares are really targeted towards studios, architectural studios, in terms of the price points and just kind of the entry levels of what you can access. You are probably looking at a couple of £1,000 for the year for basic softwares. However, there are some softwares that are free, and there are kind of lesser capacity versions of some of these softwares which are more affordable. So there are ways around it, and you don't have to necessarily strive for the most kind of photorealistic rendering software
mm,
or the most complex um, architectural software to begin your journey in the industry. I think it's just
mhm,
about figuring out what you can afford, and then doing what you can to build your portfolio. And at the end of the day, what matters is the end result.
true. So, I mean, I know you touched upon obviously how you managed to move over into starting your own business, but wasn't that like that transition sort of like, did you try and apply to other jobs after you were made redundant, or was it just a thing whereby you were like, I'm just gonna try and make this work? Because
No,
obviously
I did.
is yeah.
No, I did. I did apply to other jobs. I didn't commit to applying to other jobs. It was a half-hearted kind of backdrop,
Mm,
just so that I could tick a box in my mind that I was literally covering all of my bases. So
yeah.
I was applying for other jobs, but as most people probably know, I feel like the job market during the pandemic was crazy. It was super, super competitive and super disheartening. I think if I'd have invested too much of my time into applying for jobs, I don't think I would have been in the suitable mental space to be able to push forward with my business to the extent that I did, because it's
Mm,
disheartening when you don't hear back, and a lot of people were not hearing back because a lot of people had lost their jobs.
mm,
So the market was just crazy. So I applied for a few jobs. In all honesty, I don't think I did more than 3 or 4 days of job applications. The rest was really just working on my business, and I was lucky
yeah.
enough that I was furloughed for a few months, a couple of months, which helped in terms of the buffer. I just got my mortgage, and I needed to finish my refurb and things like that. So that was helpful. And then, yeah, I was lucky enough to get my first client, and then it kind of rolled on from there.
That's really good. I think sometimes you do just need that sort of like shock to you, or just that scare to really push you
Yeah.
sometimes into the things that you need to do. Because I suppose if you would have gotten another job, like you starting up your business may not have happened for another few months or I don't know, years or whatever, because you
Yeah,
just get
well,
all.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I have been in the industry for quite a long time, so I've been taking on side projects for a few years. So I was lucky enough to be in a position where I had a portfolio. The portfolio wasn't particularly
Okay.
remarkable, but it was kind of baseline. It showed what I could do, and I understood how to run the business because I'd studied it
Yeah.
and I'd worked in it, and I'd also started to kind of dabble with it on the side of my job. So
Yeah.
I wasn't starting from zero.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then, as an interior designer, so what does a day in your life typically look like?
It can be it can be extremely varied. Some, to be honest with you, running the company takes up more time than designing does for me. I have a junior designer now, Serena, and she is a really great asset to the company because it's really hard to juggle everything being kind of a one man band. And I also
Mhm.
have subcontractors, so for particular tasks or particular types of projects, I do have other people in the wider team who I'll be able to pass work on to as well, which is really helpful. Um, but my day can be anything from a client consultation. It can be a really creative day. I can be in a coffee shop designing all day, which most designers know you can just get absorbed in that for 8 hours straight. It's very easy to do
Yeah.
that, or it can be on site. So we do a lot of project management. Most of my projects include project management. So that means that I have to see the project from the initial concept through to implementation and procurement. So I can be on site, making sure that the builders are on schedule with what we've planned, answering questions, double checking specifications,
Mhm.
dealing with like supply and things like that. So it can
Yeah.
be anything. You wear a lot of hats, I think, in the
Yeah.
industry. Yeah.
I think I did. Yeah, I definitely didn't realize that because for me, like interior design was always more I think, aesthetic, which I
Yeah.
believe everybody thinks it is. So I didn't even realize that you'd get involved at even build stage,
Yeah.
which obviously makes sense because if you're going to design a space, you obviously want to make sure that the space that's going to be occupied in it is
Yeah.
like fit enough, is big enough to fit that design.
I think that it would be fair to say that most designers do get involved with the build stage. Um,
Yeah.
Especially at the beginning, because a lot of designers need to physically be in the space to understand the capacity and how they can push the space, how they can develop the initial concepts and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's a fairly standard procedure for interior designers. But I would say that it would be fair to assume that most designers will get involved with some extent of the build, whether that's just supervision through to finalization, or whether they're actually project managing the whole process.
Okay. So so far then, how have you found like this whole transition to being your own boss overall? How would you say it's been? Any lessons learned? Anything you do differently?
I wouldn't do anything differently. I thought it's quite cliche, but I feel like the journey is really part of what grows you as a business person and also your company as well. Like the journey is key, and that's individual to you, and that's what makes your brand, your company, your company. So I wouldn't change anything. I think the one thing I would have probably told myself at the beginning is be really ready to be completely flexible, because you have to be super adaptable, um, and ready to develop and change your concept or your route or your plan depending on what is thrown at you. And at the beginning of running the company, you have to take on projects that are not your ideal project, and you will be taking on projects and clients that will challenge you and push you kind of
Mhm.
outside of your comfort zone. So I guess it's just preparing yourself for that. And I think when somebody has kind of mentally prepared themselves for the trials and tribulations and um, the necessity to be flexible in that capacity,
Yeah.
then they're ready to take that step. Probably not before that.
Okay. So you've touched upon some, I suppose, some skills that you need if you're going to go into this line of business or just run something of your own. Do you have
Yeah.
any like additional tips or skills that you'd advise people that are interested in also maybe following your sort of career and getting into your industry?
I think I think it's good if when you begin your career in the industry, you figure out what the long-term goal is, and that can change. And I think you should
Mm,
allow yourself the grace if that does change over time, because you might begin and think you only want to be involved with the kind of like creative conceptual side of the project, like the initial design side of the project. And then down the line, you might move into kind of construction project management, or you might decide that you want to run your own company. And running your own company is very different to being a designer, because you're wearing all of the hats. So I think figuring that out
yeah.
is helpful at the beginning. But I would say at the beginning of your career, if you can just learn as many aspects of your industry or whatever industry that may be, but if it's interior design especially, learn as many aspects of that industry as you can. So myself, I started off in kitchen design and did some bathroom design. I worked for a builder who had an interior design showroom, so I did a lot of project management and PA work, so understanding what his life and his schedule was like and dealing with the
Mm,
clients. And I think that's been very helpful to me. I think specializing in kitchen design was really imperative for my attention to detail. And then obviously studying really developed my skills and my taste and my experience around FF&E and things like that. So I think if you can experience as many angles as possible, including administrative side of things, that is really helpful, and it really helps you to kind of develop your own skill set and apply that to whatever job or your own company down the line. Um, but honestly, I think one tip that I do always tell emerging interior designers or people trying to break into the industry is not to shy away from job roles that are not necessarily creatively based. So what I mean by that
mm,
is we have to account for what we're being paid. So a lot of the time, people who are trying to break into the industry are concerned because creative roles sometimes don't pay a lot at the beginning. So if you're applying for a junior design role, you may find that the salary expectations are not matching what your current job role is. And that
mm,
is fairly common. So you do tend to start off on a lower salary if you go in as a junior designer. So I actually suggest that you are open to going in as an administrative assistant or as a office manager within an interior design setting, because
yeah.
I that helped me a lot. That helped me get my mortgage because I was on a decent salary, a stable income, and it wasn't a commission based structure, and it wasn't kind of a minimum wage salary
Yeah.
either. So I was within the context that I needed to be. I was making the contacts that I needed to make. And I was also just learning things from a different perspective as to what the business looks like
True.
behind the styling, behind the design, which is quite imperative, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good advice. So, in terms of next steps for you, then I suppose building your business. But is there anything else that you have planned
I
to do?
think for us now, we are moving into the larger project. So I think we've spent a year of um, being more flexible and open with different projects that we're taking on. And now we definitely are moving into larger projects. So they are really kind of house scale projects and full project management projects. So we would be working with clients on a longer term basis. So that can be up to a year really or longer. So I think it's really focusing on a different scale at this point.
Okay, that's really good to hear. Those are all of my questions actually. So thank you so much for joining tonight. It's been really, really helpful, really insightful as well to hear more about your journey, your story, and more about interior design really. Because I literally didn't have like any idea that it was so much more like architectural.
Yeah.
Really much more of an architectural role. Yeah, there is a lot involved. So that's really good to hear. And hopefully the audience will also appreciate it and have gained some nuggets in terms of starting up their own businesses or following suit in like, interior design also. So thank you again for that. Actually one question that's just come to mind. In terms of like
Mhm.
your interior design style, like how have you developed that? Has anything inspired that? Is there anyone that's inspired you?
Honestly, I think as you kind of you age and you move through life and you experience more things and more places, your taste becomes more refined
Hmm.
and more informed based on places that you see and things that you're
Yeah.
inspired by. But to be honest, I don't push an interior design style. It's very much about my understanding of the client. So my success on the job is really about how I've understood that client and how I've created the space for that client to fit their needs and um, their aesthetic. So it's much more flexible than I think people initially think. It's more about how we listen to the client and take that on board and then apply that to create their
Uh,
space for them.
So then would you say you don't have your own signature sort of style that you put on things, or is it's more customer based on what they like?
No, I would say we do have a signature style. I think we really do pay a lot of attention to kind of classic features. So we would never go into a traditional property or even a property with kind of quite stark characteristics and rip them out and kind of start fresh and start with kind of a simple white box. That's not our style at all. So it's very much about incorporating features that have character,
Mm.
and injecting character where there isn't.
Yeah, I like that. Well, yeah, thank you again for joining. For I'm sure the viewers would have enjoyed it also watching. And
You're
if you
welcome.
guys have any questions for Janae, I'm gonna link all her socials in the description box, and you should also see her Instagram handles also popping up on the screen. So if you do want to get in touch with Bee and maybe even enlist her services, please do so. Get in touch with her. And thank you all for watching tonight, and I'll catch you later. Bye.
Bye.